So well, first of all, thank you, Bob, thank you, Phil, and the rest of the VRUG committee for inviting Mobile Reach to present today. I'm excited to share the content with you. I hope it's informative and useful. I'm running through sort of a shortened version of a presentation that I gave at IAITAM. And I know that this audience is pretty technical, so we also wanted to actually show a little bit of our technology, which I think you'll also find probably more interesting than my presentation. So we're going to have Alex joining in a little while, and he is going to do a demo and kind of show you some of our applications and some of our platform. And so he hasn't jumped on the meeting invite yet, so hopefully, Mike, you'll try to make sure he gets on before it's time for me to turn it over to him. But so ITAM in the field is, as you would expect, it's basically we're talking about IT asset management in the field, and it's what we're going to specifically talk about is connecting your mobile users to your BMC IT asset management system. And I plan to present for about 15, maybe, I'm going to jump into the Mobile Reach architecture as well. And so it probably will be about 20 minutes there. And then I'll hand it over to Alex, who will demo the Mobile Reach App Studio and some of the apps. And so, we welcome you to ask questions along the way. You don't have to wait till the end. I'm not really good about monitoring the chat. So if a question comes up and you want me to stop and answer it, then somebody just speak up. That would be great.
Yeah, I'll monitor the chat and read the questions to you.
Okay.
If we get any.
Perfect. So ITAM in the field is a program that we do at Mobile Reach that is sort of a combination of consulting with our customers to help design a very effective mobile solution for their IT asset managers that work in the field, as well as the mobile platform and the delivering of the mobile applications themselves. And so what I'm going to talk about are a lot of the things that we do with our customers in terms of talking about the things that are important in a field solution, and particularly for IT asset management. And I'm going to go, talk through sort of our formula, which is the 5 steps to build an effective ITAM in the field solution. And again, this is a little bit of a shortcut of a presentation that normally takes about 50 minutes. And 50. And so if you're interested in seeing more details, we can share that with you. We have a recording of it, and we can share that with you if you're interested. So just reach out if that's something that you want to see. So ITAM in the field, when I talk about that, it basically includes 2 things. One are the processes that your field personnel follow to do their work. So that's kind of the work that they do. And then the second piece of it are the tools that your folks use to update your CMDB. And the whole purpose of your mobile solution when we're talking about IT asset management is to keep your CMDB or your IT asset repository complete and up to date. So I'll start off here with a picture of the entire system. And so we have the very important BMC Helix CMDB or your IT asset repository, and it's where you're going to store all of the information about the IT assets that you care about keeping track of. So you guys all know about this a lot more than I do. So we'll jump to the second part, which are the processes. So in order for you to keep your CMDB up to date with the most accurate information reflecting your actual environment, you need to have processes in place to make updates to your CMDB. And those processes are in the form of either creating asset records when you need to create a new asset record for an asset you want to start tracking, or updating an asset record that is changing. There's a piece of information that needs to change about that asset. And so you need a process in place to make that update. Typically, you wouldn't delete asset records. Sometimes you will if you have a duplicate in your system. But even when you get to the point where you dispose of assets and they're no longer your responsibility, typically people want to keep those asset records in their system for historical purposes. And then when you get to a point where your CMDB is 100% accurate or very, very accurate, you've got the benefit of being able to just pull a query or run a query, pull a report, and really be able to trust the information that's in there in order to make business decisions for your organization. So that's kind of the process front. And then we've got the actors who perform the processes. And you might have a discovery tool in place or some other automated process that will make updates to your CMDB based on certain triggers or certain events. And you might have folks that are in the office sitting behind a desk, right at the BMC console, making updates to your BMC system. But a lot of the stuff that's happening to your IT assets happens in the field. And so what we're going to talk about are all the folks that are in the field, the work that they do, and the processes that they need to follow in order to make sure that your CMDB stays up to date. And that's really the whole the bottom line of what ITAM in the field is all about. And 80% of your activity happens in the field, so it's a really, really crucial part of your entire ITAM program. So when I'm talking about activity in the field, it's a variety of different types of events that happen. So it could be that you're receiving new assets into your environment. You could be moving a group of assets from one room to another. You could be doing a swap. You could be decommissioning assets. You could be moving assets into inventory or taking them out of inventory and deploying them to somebody's office or a lab, or you might be checking out assets if you have sort of a little leasing center. There's a variety of different types of actions that happen to assets in the field, and every one of those actions requires certain changes to be made to your asset records in your CMDB. So these are just some examples, and this list is obviously it's not complete, it's not exhaustive. You can have additional activities on here and different types of changes, but the bottom line is that you have asset activity that happens, and then that should result in updates that need to happen into your CMDB. And the biggest challenge that ITAM organizations have is making sure that all of that activity that happens in the field correctly drives changes into their CMDB. And that is exactly what we're trying to do with our mobile solution, is make sure that we're closing all the gaps, that we're filling all the holes in your processes with this mobile solution. So some things that get in the way are, in terms of your CMDB not getting updated when certain actions happen in the field, is that you might not actually have a process in place. You might just kind of assume that your field techs are going to make updates to your asset records, either when they get back in front of a computer or from their web interface or something like that. But they may not be doing it because you don't have a sort of a well-defined process that's in place. You may have put processes in place, but they might be confusing, or they might be inconsistent, or they might not be completely correct. And a lot of these things drive users either not to perform the processes or not to do them correctly. And in particular, processes that are too slow or tedious or time consuming tend to irritate your field technicians, and that causes frustration, which can cause other problems as well. So all of these are process problems, and the good news about that is that they can be fixed. And so that's where we always start when we're designing a mobile solution, is to identify what your processes are and make sure that when we identify what those processes are, that that's complete for your environment. And everybody's environment is a little bit different. So when you build a mobile solution, as I mentioned, the first thing that you do is you identify all your processes, because your mobile solution needs to map all of those field processes into either a single or multiple apps. And I highly, highly recommend that you build very specific, task-oriented, single-purpose apps for your team. Those are so much easier for them to use. So your mobile solution might end up being a suite of single-purpose mobile apps that basically map to all of your field processes. You might have some device preferences in your environment. You might have, I've talked with companies that are like, we are an Apple shop, all we use is Apple, or we're a Windows shop, all we use is Windows, or we have a bring your own device policy, and so everybody gets to use whatever device they want. So you need to know what devices your mobile application needs to run on, and then when you build out a mobile solution, you need to make sure that it's easy for your end users to understand and use. And it also needs to be easy for your administrators to maintain and update, because just like your ITAM environment is dynamic, your mobile application suite also needs to be dynamic to handle all the changes that happen as you move forward. So, and then finally, you want your mobile solution to be directly connected to your BMC system. And there's a couple reasons for this. Having a direct connection into BMC creates this back and forth two-way connection that allows your users to get feedback. If you push data into BMC and maybe you've accidentally pushed 2 copies of the same record, for example, you might get an error back. But that error comes, right back from BMC, versus a scenario where you have a staging table where you collect all your data, push it into a staging table, and then sometime later on, a couple hours later, maybe a day later, either you or somebody else is taking that staging table and importing it into your BMC system. And there's just a lot more room for error there. So having that directly connected to BMC and just an extension of your existing BMC environment is ideal. So I talk about 2 pillars of success that are equally important, and I'm just going to briefly cover these. The first one is that your business objectives are met, and this is why we map out your processes, because your processes really define what your business requires from your users in the field, and your mobile application, if you map to those processes, then you're meeting your business objectives. And then the second one is that you need to build a solution that your users will want to use and that they're happy using. So your user adoption needs to be high, and there's a couple things, there's quite a few things that you can do to make sure that happens, and I'll talk about that here in just a minute. So we'll go into this summary of our 5 steps to building an effective solution. And, I write out these 5 steps and I put it on a single slide like it's really easy, but, it does take time. It takes a lot of thought. It takes a lot of sort of analysis of kind of how you do business today. Sometimes it takes going back to the drawing board and redesigning processes because you have holes that need to be fixed. So don't think that just because I, put it up here like this, that these steps are really fast. They're not, but it's very rewarding to go through this process. So the first thing that you do is you design your field processes. And these are kind of this starts with those actions that we talked about earlier, the events that happen. So like you might be receiving assets, you might be, you might have assets that go out of warranty, which means you need to take them out of service, hold them for a while, then, just decommission them and dispose of them. So you've got your processes in your environment, and you basically want to write them out and then identify what the steps are that your field users need to do. And then these processes and all these steps, these become your requirements for your mobile application. So then you build your mobile application to meet all of the requirements that you've identified. And this is an example of a mobile reach screen. It's our launcher, and our launcher basically shows what we call mobile reach applets, mobile reach apps or applets. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm a big fan of single purpose apps. They're much easier for your end users, and they are much more intuitive. And there's a lot of things that you can do within a single purpose app, like you can default the status, for example. If you have an app that's specifically for decommission, the user doesn't have to change a status field to decommission, because we can do that behind the scenes. We know that that's what's happening. Things like that, you can sort of build applications that are a lot more streamlined and a lot more intuitive, that make a lot of sense. So that's the second step, is that you build the mobile applications to map to your processes. And then I've listed a bunch of items here to think about in terms of ensuring a high level of user adoption. And there's two things to think about. One is when you're building these things into your app. One is that you want to make your mobile apps easy to use. So uncluttered screens, using barcode scanners, barcode scanning so that it's easy to capture barcodes, the single purpose application, graceful error handling, those kinds of things. And then the other piece is efficiency. So you want to make that app, you want to enable your users to do their job in as few clicks as possible. So you want very efficient workflow. You want offline capable applications, so that if network connectivity is lost, the user isn't sitting there going, now what do I do? Do I have to wait until I can reconnect? What should I do? Using as little text entry as possible. So using drop lists and checkboxes, etc. So the two keys for user adoption in terms of application functionality is ease of use and efficiency. So those are the things you want to think about when designing your mobile applications. You always want to test your applications with a small group of users first, and make sure that the applications are easy to use before you sort of roll out to your larger group. And when you get to the point where you feel like your applications are in a good place, you've tweaked them, your small group is really happy with the way that they work, and you've ensured that they're following the processes, they're meeting your business requirements, and they're easy to use, then you move into a transition period where you're training your end users. And I recommend that if you think that it should take a couple of weeks for your users to become accustomed with this new process you're giving them, these applications, I would say allow maybe 3 or 4 weeks just to give them a little bit of breathing room. Make sure that you're really responsive to feedback. So if there's issues that they're having with the application, if something doesn't work quite right for them, make sure that you're very responsive to their feedback. Use a variety of training materials. We have found that videos really short videos tend to be really well received. And I like also to recommend that you create end user ambassadors. So these are people that probably started with your test group, your small group of users that you started with, that tested the app. And now these are your users that know the apps really well. And then the rest of the group has a peer that they can go to when they have questions, a peer that they can go to if they're having issues, or they're not quite sure they understand how to use the app. It's a lot easier for people to go to a peer than it is to go to someone that they consider an authority figure or higher up, especially if they're not really confident with the way things are working. So I always like the idea of having end user ambassadors kind of within the group of end users that are going to be using the applications. And then finally, you get to the deployment phase. The deployment phase is when you roll a solution out, and now this is the way that the tasks are going to be done from now going forward. And so this is kind of like cutting off the old process and starting with the new process. And it's really important, I really can't stress this enough, that you require that your users use the tool. You've designed it, you spent a lot of time in terms of designing it to make sure that it works well. You've put it through a test process, and you have goals. The reason you're putting this mobile solution in place is to ensure that you have a higher integrity in your CMDB, trustworthy data, a more accurate system. And the only way you're going to get that is if your end users use the system and follow the processes that you've defined. So it's important that you require, also, if there are issues with it, and your users aren't required to use the system, if they have problems with the apps, they're just not going to use them. They're going to go, work an alternative way. And that means that you're not going to hear about them. You're not going to hear about the issues, and you won't have an opportunity to fix them. If you require them to use it, I can guarantee you're going to if there's something wrong, you're going to hear about it. I also recommend that you kind of make the rollout a big deal, communicate how important it is to your organization, make sure you communicate the benefits to the organization and the role that each of the end users is playing to achieve those goals. Always, celebrate successes, even if it took longer than you had planned. Always be responsive to feedback and make updates as quickly as you can when there's a problem. And then, as I mentioned before, your ITAM environment is dynamic, so you're going to want to be able to make regular updates to your application. So that is the end of my presentation. I'm going to hop into a quick overview of the Mobile Reach architecture, just to give you an idea of what you're going to see here. And then I'm going to hand it over to Alex, who will walk through a demo of both the App Studio and some of our apps. So the Mobile Reach platform is basically split up into 3 different components. The first component is the Mobile Reach Gateway, which we were talking about earlier, is now installed in your environment. And the Mobile Reach Gateway is what's directly connected to your BMC system. And basically the gateway interprets all of the information that flows from your Mobile Reach clients, which are your mobile users. The Mobile Reach client is the app that's downloaded onto any of your mobile devices. And that's what actually runs all of those applets. So the applets that you build within the App Studio is where you actually build the Mobile Reach apps, or our applets. And those applets get pushed to the mobile devices. And this is kind of what they look like. You might have one for asset receive, inventory, incident management. You might have a suite of applets, and those run inside the Mobile Reach app, which gets loaded onto your device. And that app itself can be either in an app store or could be distributed internally to your environment by your application, your mobile device management software. And so all of the information that kind of flows through these applications, all of the updates that are made, those basically flow from the Mobile Reach client through the network to the gateway. And at the gateway, that is where the gateway takes that data, interprets it, and then puts it in the language that Helix can understand and pushes the data in. So that's how that works. Let me see if the only other thing I'd like to make sure that I point out is that and I mentioned this earlier, but all of the clients can run, all of the applets and the client can run completely offline. So we have a very sophisticated sort of caching mechanism in the system that allows us to sort of automatically pull the data that is going to be needed by the different applications so that they can run offline. And in fact, even if you have network connectivity, Mobile Reach will typically run offline unless we're transmitting data back and forth between the client and BMC. So I'm going to stop there. I'm going to just kind of find out if there are any questions. And then if not, I'm going to hand it over to Alex. Any questions for me?
So Nasrin, I'll throw one in there for you. It's got to do with your offline cache piece.
Sure.
Does the users, the ones that are in your tool that are setting up the Mobile Reach apps and doing that in that development piece, is that where you define the data that you want to have available in the offline, or do you predefine what kind of data you're looking for in your offline world?
Yeah, exactly. When you build the app in the App Studio, that's where you would define the data that will be cached, that needs to be cached onto the device. So like, for example, you might have a search. Let's say you have an app where the user scans in a barcode and you want to pull up an asset record. So you would have a sort of like a definition within the applet that you design that basically says, I want to do an offline search, and here's the search string of all the records that I want to download onto my device so that I can do that search. And then you might search that offline data set, and you might have a secondary operation that says, well, if it's not found in that secondary data set, I want to go and search the entire database if I have a network connection. So you can do things like that, which, you can search offline first, and then if it's not found, okay, let me go check. Let me use the network and go check the larger database to see if it's there.
Okay. Can you do it in a scenario that I set up my offline database to just keep minimal information so as not to carry too much? I keep the barcode, the serial number, device name, and maybe location, not much else.
Yeah.
But when it goes to the larger, now I get to see a whole lot more information about it.
So you can set up different views within your tables, and then and Alex can probably talk to this a little bit better than I can because he's actually done it. So you can set up a view that limits the amount of data that we pull when we run the search, a particular search. And yes, you can have that doesn't have to be the same for every time you pull a certain pull data out of a certain table. You can have different search strings for different commands or different queries.
Okay. Anybody else got questions for Nasrin there?
Go ahead. I don't have a question, but it's more of for context there about the offline stuff. We're talking tens of thousands of records being offline simultaneously. It's not just like, oh, let me get this building or this floor. So the sophisticated caching mechanism that Nasrin mentioned, it's really optimized to be able to handle a pretty high volume of assets. Obviously, it depends if you're going to be, 30, 40, 50 fields on the mobile device. You may want to, as she said, do section off certain pieces, but typically you're not. I mean, that's the whole point of a mobile app. You're not downloading all of the data. You're just taking whatever you as an organization have decided is going to be what you want the users to interact with. So that subset of data is really what we are caring about. And, we do a lot of things in a disconnected manner too, so that if, you can't put a location element into a serial number field, we'll catch that while it's disconnected. So there's a lot of things going on the client itself while it's disconnected. So it's kind of where we made our name, if you will, over time. Back in the late 90s, wireless coverage wasn't always available, so we had to do it that way. And then as we've kind of progressed into the 2020s, it's a really great way to make the apps a lot easier to use and quicker to use. And for security purposes, DoD, a lot of folks can't have that anyway. So we tend to shine a bit in that particular area, but it is fairly sophisticated, and it can be tens of thousands of records offline at a single point in time. Just wanted to add that.
I think there was another question.
Yeah, a couple of questions. When there are updates that are cached offline, how do you go about, well, let me take a step back. I'm assuming that when you're doing updates to the CMDB, you're updating to Mobile Reach has its own data set that it's providing information into that would then be reconciled with the other data sets. Is that a fair statement as far as the integration? I was trying to see that in the architectural diagram, but I wasn't able to pull that up.
So I can hop in here. So we can specify which data set it goes to. Not everyone necessarily requires their own data set for what gets sent up, but I guess I think it's best practice to do that. A lot of times we just send it up to bmc.asset.
No, I hope not, but okay. Yeah, hopefully they follow the best practice.
Yeah.
Okay. And the other part is, how do you then go about reconciliation between, let's just say I pull down an asset and it's asset 122, and for some reason Phil pulls down the same asset 122. He does an update to the same field that I do an update to. We both got our own local cache. Is it just last in is the last update, or how's that reconciled, if at all?
Yes. So the way our platform works, it's kind of hard coded in that whatever form we connect to has that last modified date. I think it's ID number 6.
Yep.
So it's going to key in off that, and it's going to recognize if that's been changed while you were offline.
Okay.
And it by default, it won't let you update that. You would have to sync first, pull whatever's been updated, and then essentially change that record again. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I'm just trying to figure out the race condition where we both pull it at the same, not same time, but about the same time, that nothing has been changed. Phil changes it on his local copy, right? Because it's on his phone, right? Because that's the strength of the system, and it's on my local. So your platform at that point, nobody's changed it because Phil and I, for some reason, are interested in the same asset. It's about the same time that we then send it back, unaware, and the local system doesn't. My local copy doesn't know that somebody else has made the change because it's local to me. So I was just trying to. Is it still applying the principle that you said? If Phil gets there first,
Yeah.
then it will
Whoever
then
gets there
block
first is going to change the system, and then the other person is not going to be able to make the change until, as Alex mentioned, they pull the new version down.
Got it.
And then they can compare it and say, okay, yes, I should make my change over the top of Phil's. Or you might be like, oh, Phil's change is more recent than mine. I'm just going to throw mine away.
No. I will overwrite Phil to just keep
Yeah, I would expect that to be.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Nasrin, since Alex is here, did you say he had a part of the presentation to do?
Yeah, he is going to actually demo the Mobile Reach App Studio and some Mobile Reach apps. So there we go.
Hey, Chris, I wasn't sure if you were about to ask a question. I apologize. I saw your mic. You pull your mic down and you put it back up.
No, I was just, we use this solution where we work as well. The way that we handle some of those race conditions that you were talking about is we don't load anything directly into the CMDB. Everything first goes to a staging form, and then there's an analysis set that's taken care of. And a lot of the times what we do for that is we utilize the scan date time information. Right, because you don't want somebody going out and doing an inventory of an asset, and then somebody else moves it and does the inventory. Yeah. So we use those scan dates and times, the information that comes from the scanner, to make sure that the most up to date information is going into the asset. Gotcha. So yeah, that is possible to do it that way as well.
Yeah, that's all the more reason. Any reason to do the pre-staging, the data set, its own dedicated data set, are all good things, and all the more reason why not to ever. By the way, I mentioned ever right directly to BMC.asset.
Right. So what we do though is we push all of our information into a custom staging form.
Yes.
It doesn't even touch asset management.
Yeah.
Until we go through custom reconciliation processes.
Right.
And at that point, it pushes into the asset data set, but only the very specific elements that we're getting from the scanners that we need.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I think ideally that using staging forms, especially for some of the processes, makes a lot of sense, and it kind of gives you control over data validation a little bit more. But are there any other questions before I kind of show you the applications? And
I'm not seeing any in the chat, Alex. So.
Okay, great. So I'm going to start off and show you the client and a few of the demo applications that we show. And I think it's important to understand that these are kind of just ways to show different features, some common processes that are workflows that people might want or use. And then, so sometimes these are really used for kind of like a starting point, and then, we can customize them to kind of whatever you need. But so everyone can see my screen correctly?
Yes.
Okay. What I'm showing right now is the it's Windows 10 client. And it does look pretty similar to what the iOS client looks like. But the nice thing about this is, you develop it right here. I have App Studio on the right. You develop it once there, And when you push it, it mostly, 95% looks the same on iOS, Windows 10, and Android. So Nasrin kind of mentioned this. This is kind of like our launcher view. This is where we have, we kind of call them applets, but it's basically inside the client. You're going to have these processes that you can use. And Nasrin kind of listed some common ones like receive and kind of like a bulk move, asset update. So what's important here is, one, you can customize all these. You can change these icons to really whatever you want, whatever color. We'll oftentimes just customize them. And then another thing is, you might have users that really only use like a receive process, but you might have 5 apps, and you can separate them. You can essentially only show certain applications based on like the group that they're in. So like, some users only see the receive app or something. So that can be useful if you're trying to only show, force users to use certain ones.
So is that permissions that are set in the for the user inside Mobile Reach, or is it permissions going back to BMC to pull them from there?
Yes, you'd put them in groups in BMC, but you do have to specify on the Mobile Reach gateway.
Excellent.
You'd have to specify that group.
Excellent.
Excellent. Yeah. So I'm going to jump in the asset update application, just because it has a couple things couple features that I'll show you. And this one, because the asset database is very large, we don't want to pull all the assets down. So immediately when you jump into this, it's going to ask you to set a certain location. You can default it to certain values, but these are just kind of drop downs that you'd kind of go through. And then once you pick your location, you'd hit save, and then it would download all the assets. This is a demo instance, so there's really not a whole lot of data. And it's showing computer system, monitor, printer. But the main kind of purpose of this application is like, you're going to go out maybe to a singular asset, and you might be checking certain assets or something, and you might see something that you need to be like, oh, maybe you want information on it. You could scan it. We do have the ability to scan up in the barcode after these assets have been downloaded at a certain location. And then you can kind of see the certain data. So like I can go in here, I can look at all the field information, different statuses, categorization. Additionally, you can see, location information, work notes, whatever you need. So one thing I do want to show is kind of how easy it is to make a change, how quick it is. So this App Studio right here is actually the App Studio file for this application. So like if I were to go into here, I'm gonna dive into this a bit more, but I'll just kind of show you briefly. Like if I wanted to go in here and change like a label to something, I could change it to like VRUG or something. And you'll see it's changed in our system here. It's on I typed it in over here. By default, it will pull the remedy label. So if you do change it in remedy, it will show it the next time a user syncs. But if you type it in like I just did, it would override it. So I'm just going to hit save. This is going to save to our internal gateway that we have. And then all you have to do is kind of close out, go to what we call App Manager. You'll see that it's a sync button. I can hit update. I'll just go back in here, and then I can go up here, and we'll see that VRUG is now the name of this field. So really quick to make a change. You don't have to go through any like Play Store or, the iOS store. It's just through what we call the deployment folder. It's part of the gateway. You download it, and then you can really drop in the file. I'm really just updating this App Studio file. So pretty straightforward.
And this will work against custom forms as well as CMDB, correct?
Yeah, it will. So I actually worked with Jason Miller a lot on an application. He was able to build some custom forms that made the process a little bit better on the mobile client. Because like, for instance, this is actually kind of if you can build like a form that kind of captures, computer system, monitor, printer as like a, one big join form or something, then you don't have to show them in like these 3 tabs, which can be a little bit tough for the user to sort through. So sometimes it's easier just to have a single form for that. But like a staging form is a custom form that you would just select that and point to that and upload information to it. Another thing with this application, you can also relate, asset records. You can create people relationships, add people, just kind of go through the process. And right now, again, our system's pretty small, and you can't have it search like on a empty field, or you could require that people, they put in something there. But it's essentially just inserting these relationship records, and we can default, if you wanted to default like request type or something when it opens up, then we could certainly do that. So that's kind of it for the update app, I think. I'll kind of show you, I'll kind of show you some other projects that I'm working on here actually at the moment. So, and then I'll hop into App Studio a little bit more. Okay. Let me just move this over. So now I'm showing you, it's like a screen share of my, I have a Pixel 6 Pro, so Android. Now I'm running Android. And I'm going against a different gateway. This is just a gateway on my computer. I just have Mobile Reach downloaded. And I just have these 2 applications in here. This is like a icon I have for receive and audit. This is, I haven't specified an icon yet, so this is like a default icon that you'll see. But this is kind of a receive process that we currently have. This one does go directly to AST computer system, but again, I think typically for receive processes, we usually go to a staging form. But in this case, so a couple cool features here. Again, we want to leverage like drop downs and really like search options that require the user to select the correct data. We don't want them to have to remember any of this. So all these drop downs are pulled in from Remedy, the specific form. So tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, category type item. And you can just kind of go through it, and you'll see like, as I'm going to go through here, these boxes are grayed out, and as you click them, they become accessible. So it's kind of driving the correct data input. So, and if if I were to change, this, it's going to clear out the other ones as you go down. So one thing to think about a lot too, with when you're especially on a mobile device, sometimes when you're with like a tablet, you have a lot more real estate to work with, but with mobile, it's a little bit it's a little bit tighter. So if you were to select product name, in this case, one of the features, we're hiding those fields. They're still there, but we're just kind of showing you what you selected. This kind of gives you the real estate down here. And you can open this up. Oop. So it's just some hiding and showing features that you can use, which, are pretty helpful on the mobile device. Let me see here. So another thing that we have are kind of, especially when you're doing like a bulk receive, you want to receive things really quick, or like you're receiving a lot of items that are all like, you might be receiving 20 of these iMac 27 inches. You don't want to have to fill out all this information every time. So really you just want to scan quickly. And I'm just going to type this in here, but the idea here is like, you're going to do a really fast insert and then scan the next item. So you're just going to scan the first item, it's going to save it, and then you just scan the next item and kind of move quickly through it. Okay, this is a good example too. We can have basically we can do a regex pattern and make sure that whatever is being input are the correct values that follow a certain pattern. So like basically it's not going to let me save it until I start with the correct number.
And that's also really helpful if, for example, somebody accidentally scans in a serial number into that tag number field. If we have a pattern on the tag number, then we won't put the serial number in the tag field. So that helps keep your system from getting populated with data that's not correct.
Yep. We can also do run validation. So I'm just gonna, I'm just trying to put in a duplicate tag that I just tried to put in the same tag. Again, this is kind of for offline right now. I'm not actually checking the database. It's really just seeing like in a current session if I've scanned a duplicate tag at this point. So it's like, hey, you just scan the same item, put in a new number, and then you can kind of continue through. So the idea is, if you have like a Bluetooth scanner that's connected to the device, or if it's some scanner that's integrated, or if it's tethered, you'd just be able to go up to those items and scan them really quickly without having to put all that information in again. One thing that we've also done, which I thought was kind of cool, was we had a client that had a really long barcode, and they always wanted, they're like, we only need the last 8 characters of that. So like they would scan the whole thing, it'd be like 20 or 30 characters, but all that we would pull in to show into that tag number field were, the last 8 characters. Or even we've even used it so it actually split up, I think, the barcode, and part of it went to one field and another part went to another field. So like you can do some cool stuff like that where, just using regex pattern matching, and then you're just substituting. So any questions on this so far? I'll show you kind of when I hop back here. You'll see like you can review all the assets that you just scanned in for receiving.
Yeah, hey, Alex, I've got a question for you. This is Phil Bautista. Back when we first started integrating barcode scanners with the AR system, right? One of the configurations for the wedges we have, and it's just because I can't really see exactly what you're doing, but one of the configurations for the scanners were a carriage return after the scan. Is that how this is set up? So you can just scan and it's a carriage return, and the carriage return would trigger actually an active link in this particular case on the workflow. Is that what you're doing, or are you having to scan it and then hit a button on the device?
Yes. So it's kind of if I open this back up here, yeah. So what it really runs the same function. Typically, it's kind of like the same functions that you have on the save button as well as the scan functionality. So when you scan into like this tag number field, it would automatically save it and clear it out. Right now, I'm just kind of typing it in manually and then hitting save, but that does the same function as if you were to scan into it and then save. So you don't have to like manually touch into the fields. Does that answer your question?
I think so. So you're saying that, and I think this was a configuration of a scanner, if I'm correct. We use the old simple scanners, right? Like you see at Home Depot, that you would configure the scanner so that once it scanned the barcode, it would provide a carriage return, which I think is the same thing as you're hitting save. My question is, when you're doing bulk input, right? Can you just take the scanner, configure it to have a carriage return or some other carriage return line feed after the scan, so that you can just bring this application up and go to the field and go scan 1, scan 2, scan 3, scan 4, or are you having to say scan and then hit the little target button, I think, which is your save button, and then scan again and then hit the save button? That's my question.
So Phil, you can actually do that, your preferred scenario. So just scanning a barcode and having it automatically do the save without having to configure anything in the barcode scanner. So you don't actually have to configure the carriage return. Within the Mobile Reach product, we can detect when you configure the scanner to the app, we know that the data that has been input via scanner, and we can automatically jump to another action. So
you actually control it. You actually control it in App Studio. And I can show you that. So like Nasrin said, you're not configuring it on the barcode scanner. As long as the scanner works, we have like as long as we've like tested it and we know it works with our platform, then yeah, we have an on scan function, run this, like automatically save it. So yeah, it's something you do in App Studio.
Perfect. Thank you, Alex.
I can show that in a little bit too. Okay. Any other questions on this one? I'm going to briefly show a couple more features on this audit app. I don't know if I'm running at what kind of time I have left, but I do want to get to App Studio at some point. So I'm going
to say that John Stevens Hall still hadn't joined us, and unless Darius is willing to tap dance, you may have as much time as you want.
Okay, perfect. So I'll show you this audit app kind of quickly. The way this one works, the idea is you're performing an audit on assets in your system. The way this is set up is it kind of shows you if something's been scanned in the last 2 weeks or not. That's like the premise of it. But you'd go into a specific location, you'd search for it, and then you'd kind of continue on. Then what it did there, it just synced up with Remedy, and it pulled down the assets at that particular location. So now we can see 5 assets, and in this case, this icon is to indicate to the user, like, hey, this is, hasn't been scanned in the last 2 weeks. That's this criteria. So you have this field up here, and I'll actually do a scan for this. Let's see here. So like this button, this barcode down here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I just have now I'm just using a camera scanner, so it's not the most efficient, but it still works. So you can see it just scanned real quick. And then you can see it has a check mark, and really all it did was it was looking through this list, found that barcode or tag number existed, and then it updated the last scan date, and then that's going to trigger this icon here.
So let me ask you a question, Alex.
Yep.
So we are using RFID tags,
Yep.
and you know, some of the concept you were showing earlier about taking a portion of it and making the tag number be just part of what came in, but at the same time keep the whole RFID tag behind the scenes. So we split our data into two fields, kind of thing. So the readable tags, like the last 8 or 9 characters of the RFID tag.
Yeah.
But when we're doing inventory scenarios, we walk into a room with our RFID scanner and we just hold the button down and wave it around the room, and we'll come back with 50 items.
Yeah.
Thing. Y'all handled that as well?
Yeah, we do have that. We have used there's actually, I think, a cool RFID app that we have. I don't know if it's in our demo or not, but it essentially does that. So I think in that case, when we did it, we went to a staging form, and I think the main reason, one of the reasons was like we wanted to handle a lot of different statuses. So some of the statuses I think were like, expected in this location but not found, expected and found, or like found but not expected, like it was essentially in the wrong location.
We also have, it's not our RFID tag.
Yeah. I mean,
If you're using an RFID reader and there's something else that has a tag on it, your RFID reader is going to pick it up. So that's another nice thing for, if you put a pattern on your tags, when you're using RFID, you can just pick up your stuff and ignore everything that doesn't match it. That's something else that we do. And it's the same thing. I love that feature, using RFID for inventory. It's a great time.
It's really cool. And I mean, it would essentially work like kind of like this. And you just hold it, and it, as I've seen it when I was, I think, developing the app that did it, and the icons just would change as it picked up the barcodes. So we do have that capability in App Studio to handle RFID. So I'm not sure if we handle every RFID scanner, but there are definitely a few that.
Yeah, I looked. Mike and I were talking the other day, and the one we use is in your list. So
okay, yeah, perfect.
It's the TSL 1120.
Yep.
So I guess this one, a couple other features on this is like, can't remember any of the other asset tags that are, maybe this one here, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. So like, let's say we search a tag number that's in a different location. Well, this one that I thought that might exist, but it doesn't. Basically, this is not found. This app is actually set up to like, first it looks through this list. If it doesn't find it, then it actually does an online search to see if it exists in your database. And if it does, it would actually change the location to the current location. And then if it's not found in the database, you have the option to create a new asset. So like I could hit yes, and it's a very similar experience to what we just saw on the Receive app. So this is kind of like a combined app, which we don't always do, but that's kind of the idea there. But that's mostly I think the audit app. I'll kind of jump into some App Studio stuff if you want to see some more things on how that's kind of structured, or if anyone has any questions before I jump into that.
No, I think it'd be good, Alex. And one comment on people, whether we like it at Mobile Reach or not, mobility can actually kind of be cool. And people like to kind of make suggestions of, oh, can you guys do this? Because I think it'd be really great if. And then that's when you kind of get in that, well, we can add it, but how much do you really want to customize or get away from the center of what the purpose of the application is to do? So we try in the ITAM in the field consulting stuff that Nasrin was mentioning at the top of the call. We like to try to dissuade people from adding cool things into really just being much more functional, because at the end of the day, you just want that data to be correct. And the mobile apps, that's its purpose. It's to make the workforce more efficient, but most importantly, get that data correct. So when we go through requirements, people always ask lots and lots of really like cool types of questions, and they are. And we're like, yeah, well, we can do that, but you probably don't want to put that in there. So we do try to dissuade people from doing certain things and kind of keep it close to center.
So Alex, I'll give you about another 10 minutes. Is that okay?
Yeah,
All right.
I think that'd be good to cover like an overview.
All right. And then John Stevens Hall has joined us now, so he'll be able to present, and Darius won't have to tap dance.
But I think I just heard from John on the back end. He may have a hard stop coming up. Apparently he didn't have this on his calendar.
Yeah,
So
sorry, folks, I didn't have an invite for this at all, and I missed the date.
Oh no, did I miss putting the invite to you? I
Yeah.
apologize.
Sorry, and that's why I've missed the session. Sorry, I probably should have put my own note down, but I didn't. So
Okay. All right. So about 10 minutes, Alex, go.
Okay. Okay, so I'll just show you briefly kind of what the audit app looks like in App Studio, and kind of the breakdowns of the components. So this is kind of like the development environment of it. Just the panels, you have this kind of, it's the application components. Really, it's just a tree of all the different nodes that we're using and the different components. The toolbox, this is where you can kind of drag and drop, maybe like a text field or a Dropbox. There's all kinds of different things depending on where you are. Component details are like, if you're in you click on a particular node, then you can see any, maybe a little bit more customization for that particular component. So that's kind of this. I'm kind of comparing it to like if you're coding or something on like Android or iOS, but you just don't have any code. The code's just behind the scenes as you're dragging and dropping these different components. There's very little actual coding that you have to do. So kind of going through it, record sets are in every application. Record sets are essentially what get pulled down for an application and get cached. This is where you might have, like, let's say, yeah, this is actually a good example. So like this location field that's searching is actually searching through this record set that's been pulled down. And like the qualifier I have is just the data set is bmc.asset. We only have one record in this, but you can really specify all kinds, whatever SQL query that you could put into Remedy. You can essentially copy and paste it into the query builder. I will say there are, it can get pretty complicated. So for instance, if you're doing an application with like work orders and you want to pull down all the work logs, but the work orders are only associated to the logged in user, you only want to pull down work logs that are associated to the work orders that are associated to the logged in user. So you can do subqueries where, it would pull down those work orders and then go out and look at the work log form and then pull the work logs associated to those work orders. I hope that didn't get too wordy, but if that makes sense. The idea is you really don't want to be pulling down a ton of data. And if you can limit it as much as possible, that's where you can do it. So this app, again, I mentioned it's just going directly to computer system. And what we've done actually is also you can specify the view that you're using. A lot of times clients will add a view, just a mobile reach view to the forms that we connect to, and only put whatever fields that are going to be used on the client in that view from the form. This can save considerable amount of download time. So the way it's kind of set up is like you have a list view, these are essentially just a list of all the records, and then a rec view is the fields that are going to be within each individual record. So every record you tap on will look like that. Inside that, you have tabs. You can show every tab, like it'll just by default it'll show along the top, but you can hide them, and then most commonly we hide them, and then you kind of drive the workflow via buttons to navigate to the different tabs. So so one thing that's kind of cool about this is like this is essentially like a related list is what we call it in our App Studio, but you can show any kind of form, especially if there's like a relationship to it. So like a common one is, if you have work order form, you're going to have work order tasks. So, you'd want to show the tasks in that work order that are associated it. And then, users could click through and complete each task if they wanted. So that's kind of useful for some of that stuff. But some of this, so like to show you again, kind of how easy some of the stuff are, the toolbox down here. So, I can type in button, it's just down here. You can drag and drop it. Or if you just double click it, it's going to show up wherever you had it, and you'll see it pop up here. And I can just say like test button. And then this is where you get a lot of the functionality. So the system has functions built into it. And this is one of them where it's like an on click, and you can go over here and you have a whole list of functions that you could do. Like modify fields is a common one, because if you're going to press a button, let's change this, or change some value of a record. The scan option, I think, let me see here. Yeah. So we talked about earlier, like the on scan functionality. So, in this case, this is a good example of it where I'm on scan. It basically checks to see if the tag number is empty or not. And then if it is, we're going to pop up a message, and it'll say like, please enter barcode. And then it basically throws an error, doesn't let any more on scan functions run. But it's really just kind of building out this tree here. So if it passes like that first one, then it'll do like on scan. I'm going to look for the record that's in this table. And if I find it, update that value. If I don't find it, perform a search online. If I don't find it again, ask user. So like it can get, you can get into the weeds a little bit with how deep you go on some of these queries, but oftentimes it's not as difficult like that as that. Sometimes it's just as easy as just saying like on scan, save it. So I think a big part of App Studio is just kind of knowing what functions or playing around with what functions are necessary. But it's pretty easy to pick up, I think, generally, if you just play around with it. I think Jason has some experience doing that. So, I mean, he could probably talk to it more if he wants, but.
Alex, this all looks great and pretty simple to use and everything. And we would really appreciate it. But since John is over in UK, I would love to give him some time before he hits 3 a.m. in the morning over there.
Yeah. So. Yeah. I think I'm all done anyway. So
it's all right. You're not even my last meeting. I wouldn't worry.